во-первых, это, конечно, провокация, совершенно очевидно, это провокация. Во-первых, она была комплексной и проводилась не только британцами, но и американцами. Смотрели, что где у нас включается, как работает, где что находится. Мы это и видели, и знали, поэтому давали такую информацию, которую считали нужным. Может, я проговорился, меня военные извинят. Спрашивайте, зачем нужно было совершать такую провокацию? Ради чего это все делается? Ради того, чтобы подчеркнуть, что эти люди без уважения относятся к выбору крымчан о присоединении к Российской Федерации? Они там чего-то не признают? Ну хорошо, не признавайте дальше. Зачем провокации подобного рода осуществлять? Вот вы сказали, что мир стоял на грани мировой войны. Да нет, конечно. Даже если бы мы потопили этот корабль, все равно трудно было бы представить, что мир стал бы на грани Третьей мировой войны. Потому что те, кто это делают, знают, что они не могут выйти победителями из этой войны.
Hello and welcome to the Happy Dystopian. After an incident in the Black Sea, Russian President Putin asserts that even if he would have sunk the British warship, there would be no threat of a World War III, because the West would not dare to go into a conflict with Russia. It seems to me that Putin claims that he could sink a NATO warship with impunity. And the question which I would like to answer today is, could he? Well, first of all, as Putin defines it, he says the West starting a war against Russia is a war which could not be won. And in that he is of course right. Since the time when both Russia and the West have atomic weapons, it is very hard to win a conventional conflict. Unless, of course, the Russian regime completely collapses, like it happened at the end of World War I. So in that sense, Putin is absolutely right. On the other hand, if we compare NATO to Russia, it quickly becomes clear that a competition between the two would not be closely matched at all. Let's look at the different elements. First of all, the GDP, the gross domestic product, which is simply a measure of the value of the production which can be attained within a single year. Not only is NATO far larger than Russia, Russia is not able to compete with some of the European NATO members, such as France and the UK. In terms of their yearly defense budget, although Russia has quite a large budget, it is incomparable to that of the entire NATO. In terms of population, Russia is quite large, and therefore they also have a large active military manpower. Even so, their number of aircraft carriers, for instance, is quite low when you compare it to the overwhelming force of NATO. So we are in a strange paradox of the West being afraid of Russia, while if we look at the numbers, it should be far and far stronger. Well, there are some reasons for this. And an important part is located in the Baltic states. The states of Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania, who used to be part of the Soviet Union, are now independent nations and all member states of NATO. However, as you can see from the picture, the Russians still have a base on the far side of the Baltics, called Kaliningrad. This exclave is being used as a military base, providing access to the Baltic Sea and also almost completely cutting off the Baltic states from their NATO allies. With Putin speculating on bringing the Russian speakers in the Baltics back into Russia, there is a serious threat which should be considered. As it seems, the Russians have the Baltics surrounded. On the other hand, if you look at it from a different perspective, the Russian exclave in Kaliningrad is surrounded by NATO. The only reason that the West has to fear Russia in this theater is because they have less military personnel and hardware in that region. However, you could see it from another perspective, from a completely different perspective. What we call Kaliningrad nowadays used to be known as Königsberg. It was a core part of the German culture, known among other things to be the birthplace of Immanuel Kant, one of the most important Enlightenment philosophers. Why are we afraid Russia will conquer the Baltics? Instead, Russia could also be afraid of NATO interfering in Kaliningrad. Sadly, NATO is not bringing its full force to bear in this region. It seems that although NATO is far stronger, it is also more divided than the Russian Federation. And we have seen some examples of this last week. For instance, Hungary has passed a law that bans the depiction or promotion of homosexuality and transgenderism to those under 18. Although you can say a lot about the good or bad parts of this law, what is interesting is that a number of Western European politicians immediately denounced the Hungarian policy in their own country. Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte went as far as to say that if the Hungarians want to govern as they do, they should not be in the European Union. In another show of Western European arrogance, there was an issue last week with Slovenia. The Slovenian Premier Janša is currently the chair of the European Union. After he posted a picture on Twitter calling some judges communists, the Dutch European Commissioner Frans Timmermans refused to even be in a picture with Janša. Well, to me it seems very strange that an unelected bureaucrat who is a member of a marginal party refuses to be in the same picture as the leader of an EU member state. I believe the Western Europeans are behaving quite arrogantly. I should never forget that they need Central and Eastern Europe just as much as Central and Eastern Europe needs the West. So my final suggestion to these Western European champions of freedom and democracy would be the following. If Western Europe really wants to promote democracy, they should make sure more troops are deployed to the Baltics. And I will leave you with that. Stay sane, and I will see you next week.